is convening at 9:37 a.m. on April 10th, 2025. This meeting is being held in person and through Zoom video conferencing and is being recorded. The recording will be posted to the internet for public viewing. I will now call roll. Darcy? Here. Natalie? Not here yet. Melanie?
Here.
Lori?
Here.
Caitlin?
Here.
Christy?
Here.
Amber, absent. Amanda?
Here.
Deanna, unsure. Erin?
Here.
And Maya? Here. Okay. Members, when you wish to speak, please state your first name for the record. Committee members are asked to not use the chat feature during meetings. The Health Licensing Office asks that individuals attending through Zoom keep their phones muted and cameras off during the entire meeting or until they are given an opportunity to comment during the public and interested parties feedback period, if indicated on the agenda. Public comment is limited to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to this committee, which this committee has statutory authority to regulate. Public members wishing to speak, please sign in on the roster sheet available in the room or email Josh Page at josh.page@oha.oregon.
We do everything after Page again.
Yes, at oha.oregon.gov. And provide your first and last name. Everyone is asked to use appropriate language, manners, and protocols when conducting committee business.
Natalie is also here now.
Oh. Okay, Natalie joined at 9:39. Excellent. Okay. First, let's do some introductions. So I will just kind of go around the room. So we have two new members to the committee. So I'm Sandy Patnode. I'm the analyst for this program and 5 others. So I've been here 30 years with the office, and so I have some experience, but I'm always learning things new, and this group is no different than the others learning new things. So that's me in a nutshell.
Good morning, my name is Bob Bothell. I'm the director here at Health Licensing, and I've been here 12 years, and I started in our regulatory department.
My name is Tina Russell. I'm the licensing manager and I've been here 28 years.
I'm Amanda Smith, and I feel like I've been here for 30 years.
I'm one of the members of the Rules Advisory Committee. I don't know what else to say about that.
I mean, where are you from?
Oh,
Where do you hail from?
where do I hail from? Salem, Oregon. And I am a professor at Western Oregon University currently.
Hi, I'm Mel Delion, and I am here
I don't know. Where do you hail from?
PCC, Portland Community College. I've been an interpreter for 25 years.
I'm Darcy Lemieux from Portland, Oregon. Interpreter, instructor of the interpreting program, ESL program. I've been interpreting for quite some time as well.
I'm Lori Harrison. I am the administrator of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program at Northwest Regional ESD, where I've been for 20-ish years, 21 years.
Christy Kirsten, program administrator for Columbia Regional Inclusive Services, Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I've been in the field of deaf education for 30 plus, and in my role as administrator for 10.
My name is Maya Kowalski. I am from Grand Rock Hospital over in La Grande. I am the telemedicine coordinator and administrator over interpretation services at the hospital.
I'm Erin Minyard, the language access program coordinator at Legacy Health. I'm also an Oregon certified Spanish healthcare interpreter. I've been an interpreter for 20 years and at Legacy for 18. And I'm happy to be on this advisory committee.
Thank you. We're happy to have you.
Yes.
Can we get the qualification staff
Yes.
introduced real quick?
And
And we have one online as well. So Derek?
Hi, my name is Derek Holmes, qualification analyst. I've been in the office for a little over 6 years.
I'm Tricia Mowell, I'm a qualification specialist, and I have been with the office for about 2 years.
Haley?
Hi, my name is Haley Revere, and I've been with HLO for 3 months.
Caitlin's, and Caitlin.
And Caitlin?
And if Natalie's there.
Hi, Caitlin speaking. My name is Caitlin Oldham. I am an educational interpreter. Only been interpreting for 5 years, so I'm the baby of the group. But I am happy to be here.
Natalie.
Yeah, good morning. This is Natalie. I'm the Language Access Manager at Salem Health, and I've been an interpreter for over 11 years, and I am also happy to be here. Sorry I could not be in person today.
Oh, Heather, you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Sammy. My name is Heather Vogelsong. I'm an attorney with the Oregon Department of Justice. I've been with the department since 2005, and I've been advising HLO and its various boards and programs since 2016. Good to be here today.
Josh?
I'm Josh, I'm the board specialist. I've been with the HLO for 8 months now, 9, 6, 7 months, something like that.
We have high turnover. And Chrissy, please?
I'm Chrissy. I'm the executive assistant. I've been with HLO since October, and I do a lot of the recruitment for the board. So if you know anybody, come my way.
Okay. We're actually gonna, I'll give just a brief overview of the agenda. We're going to take every hour and a half, a 10-minute break for the interpreters. You guys are gonna have to, like, I will forget. And then the agenda, we're gonna go into executive session next to get some legal advice, and then we'll jump right into the rules. And in your packet, it starts with the emergency exceptions and extenuating circumstance rule. We're looking at the general list rule, making sure that those changes were made, and any other rules that we set. So with that said, we will enter executive session. The Board of Sign Language Interpreters Rules Advisory Committee will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192-660-2F, ORS 192-355-9A, and ORS 40.225 for the purpose of considering information exempt from public disclosure at 9:45 a.m. on April 10th, 2025. Representatives of the news media shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Audience members attending through Zoom will now be moved into a separate breakout room. And audience members attending in person are asked to leave the room both for the duration of executive session. Those authorized to attend the executive session, please continue to keep your phone muted and cameras off. Are there any representatives of the news media on Zoom? Recognizing there is no news media in attendance, the public will be moved into a separate breakout room for the duration of executive session. We will return to open session before taking any final action or making any final decisions. It is estimated that the committee will return to public session at, how many, 20 minutes, Heather?
You might want to, yes, 20 sounds good.
Okay, so 10 a.m.-ish, 10 a.m.-ish. Please be aware that it's possible that the committee's executive session may last longer than 20 minutes. If the public has any questions about whether the committee is still in executive session, please no. Then the public can contact Josh Page at josh.page@oha.oregon.gov. We're now in executive session. The board carrying interpreters, the rules of rights for the committees is now exiting executive session and reconvening open session at 11:09 a.m. No final decisions were made and no votes were taken in executive session. Public will be moved from the breakout room back into the meeting, and representatives of the media may once again report on all board discussions and actions. And we're going to take a 10-minute break. Okay, so we're back from executive session, and we're going to talk about on page 14 of your packet, the emergency care exceptions and extenuating circumstances rule. This is a draft. It can change. This is just a jumping off point for the RAC. And several questions. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4 are specific to the law. They're just in there, just because. They don't necessarily have to be, but we'll put them in there so everyone knows. 5 and 6 are 2 separate, just 5. No, 5 and 6 are separate, sorry. And these are the ones that are up for debate. So couple questions. So 5 is the pro-tactile, and the question here is, in the law, the definition of sign language interpreting is basically visual interpreting. And so is pro-tactile interpreting a form of visual interpreting? And if it's not, would it be an exception, or however you want to phrase it, be appropriate? So that's the first question. And are there similar things that you might want to add besides that?
Go ahead. This is Lori, and I don't know enough about protactile signing to know if there is an assessment tool that could or would be used in determining licensure for that. So I'm going to defer to someone else.
And this is Erin. I have a question. I thought pro-tactile and tactile were different. And so I was wondering if those needed to be included.
Darcy.
Both need to be included.
Darcy here. Yes, I think pro-tactile, which is PT, we should add and tactile because they are 2 separate things within the deafblind community at large. Sometimes they can use them interchangeably. We need someone who is familiar with both, and we don't know which skill set they have until they get there. Oftentimes, they can say deafblind work, but does someone use tactile or pro-tactile? That's an important definition. They will need to know both because they're different competencies. So we should add the word and tactile. And we can think about looking at that as a whole. Go ahead.
And what is the difference between tactile and pro-tactile?
So tactile, sorry about that, thank you. Tactile is hands-on all the way, 100%. Whereas pro-tactile is hands-on in addition to situational context, which is given on someone's back. Maybe Amanda would be able to add more to that explanation. But pro-tactile is a newer divergence of tactile. It's a more effective way to communicate holistically, but not everyone knows pro-tactile. It's more the younger generation that uses it compared to tactile being used more commonly with the older generation within the deafblind community. So those, that's the difference between those two. And this is Amanda. I would say with
Sorry, this is the
protactile,
interpreter, you gotta stand up if I have to cut the pen.
no problem. Protactile is an emerging language, whereas tactile interpretation is a modality of interpretation. So how a person interprets through tactile touch, as opposed to using protactile, which is a language for that person. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay.
Switch to English.
Darcy here, it might be helpful to add how they're both viewed from a deaf-blind community perspective. Is it touch focused, touch oriented? If you're hands off, you lose information. Everything is touch based. So again, technically it could fall under an extenuating circumstance. That could be a good fit. However, it can also be viewed as a visual language for protactile, but I'm gonna have to think more deeply on that. It really is a touch-centric approach. That's something for the group to consider.
So this is Amanda, I'm gonna use English. Are you any clearer? Okay,
I
so
think that they're both
both touch.
touch-based.
Yes, they're both touch-based because they are with deaf-blind individuals who use touch as a medium for communication, right? So protactile is an emerging language, meaning it is like comparable to ASL or Mexican Sign Language or French Sign Language or something like that. So people can interpret between all kinds of different languages, and protactile is one of those languages, okay? Then when we interpret, the way that we interpret, so the way that they are interpreting right now is visual. So Darcy is using her eyes to communicate with them, right? If she were deafblind, they would get closer to her and they would actually have hands on each other. And that's tactile interpreting. So it's the language that you're using is ASL, usually, but they are reading it through hands on.
So it's the function.
Sure,
Function
yeah,
is tactile.
yes, the function is tactile, which we would call modality, right? Yeah, so the function, yes, exactly. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
This is Mel. I would just add that the definition and defining it as protactile and tactile is respectful to the deafblind community. Protactile is the language that's emerged by deafblind people for deafblind people. I can send you videos if you want.
So this is Erin. So it sounds like we're all agreeing to include both protactile and tactile.
Sorry, this is the interpreter. Can we hold just one for a second? This is the interpreter also. I just want some clarification on, is Darcy gonna be our chairperson for the meeting and calling on people? Is that still happening?
Sure. Oh, sure. If we want to continue doing that, that's fine. Who's next? Who's speaking?
Hi,
Erin.
Erin. So it sounds like we agree that we want to add tactile to the protactile. So we agree to that. So I think the other part of this question, the two things that I understand are that if we agree that the way that the statute has defined protactile and tactile, we don't have, we're okay with that, we're okay with that. But then the next step is, do we all agree that people who are providing protactile and tactile signing don't need a sign language interpreter license? Are we agreeing to that?
Yes.
Okay, yes, great.
Darcy here. That's a good point. Whereas not providing a license because it's such a small group of hearing and deaf individuals who have that skill set, specifically, a very small amount of people. There may be other interpreters who have superficial knowledge and experience. They can do brief interpretations, simple interpretations, but something more in depth, out of their scope, that would not be appropriate. That has been an issue for many deafblind individuals and not receiving full access to services with interpreting in that regard specifically. So it would need to be that small group of individuals. And again, because the opportunity to work, many of them don't have a license because of the lack of opportunity to work in that setting. Whereas in Washington State, they have many hearing interpreters and deaf interpreters in that area who are not licensed but can provide those interpretation services for the deafblind community. Because there's a larger deafblind community in the Seattle area, so there's more opportunities. Now, a lot of people are retiring, and where's the training and support for the novice interpreters to take those spaces? There's just not enough recruitment in that area. And here specifically, there's such a small number of people who have that skill set.
So this is Erin. So if someone says that they are a pro-tactile interpreter, we're just gonna trust that they are, and we're not gonna worry about anything else. So we're not worried that some random person's gonna be like, I'm a pro-tactile interpreter, but really they aren't? I mean, is there risk in that?
Yes, there's a possible risk involved with that. Who gets to decide whether or not someone is or not is the deafblind individual. They'll tell you this individual isn't qualified. Okay. Sometimes the interpreter could be learning, they're immersing themselves within PT and that community. Maybe they've moved away and they've moved back, they're a little rusty with their skills. They would have to do that self-analysis to determine whether or not they can provide equitable interpreting for that person in PT or tactile. So they would have to realize on their own that their skills aren't up to par, that they've declined, and to stop. That could be through the agency, the deafblind consumer, also needing to inform that this individual is no longer at this moment able to do this type of work. But there is risk involved, you're right.
This is Lori, and I'm gonna push back just this much because I feel like we had this conversation months ago about the importance of licensure for deaf folks in the population. And one of the reasons for that was because we didn't want the onus to be on the deaf client to have to complain if they had somebody who wasn't doing a good job. I feel deaf-blind clients are marginalized even more so than our deaf clients, and I'm wondering why we wouldn't consider requiring licensure.
Amanda? This is Amanda. I think in regards to your comment, Erin, about risk, absolutely, there is risk involved. For now, if we allow the community to proceed in that direction, because as Lori has explained, there is no formal assessment, there's no criteria or certification at all. It's being developed, right? It's developing, but nothing is established. So I think for now, if we have an exemption for those people and listen to the community as it grows, goes through that process and develops, then we could create rules for that in the future. To like what you mentioned, Lori, to have more formalization and a standard, maybe that's not the right word, more acceptance, accepting with training, having a foundation for that. And we can work that into the licensing system with criteria, but since it's so new, how would we even evaluate for that license? So currently, we can pay attention to the community and at the same time know that we could write a rule later on.
So one more, I appreciate that because it's really critical that if this is what the community is asking for, that we respect that, and I'm fully ahead of that, but behind that. And just one tiny other thing is that I'm thinking about like abusive relationships.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's such a tiny exception that it wouldn't, but I'm just thinking, if I'm a deafblind individual and this person that's always with me is saying that they're a protected interpreter, but they have some sort of power over me, how do I tell someone else that if no one else can communicate with me? So, I mean, again, you could probably come up with exceptions for every single thing that we can't cover. But that's just one of the things that comes to mind that would concern me. But the hope would be that that person would find a way to communicate through someone else that something is wrong and that this person is not actually representing them and is, have an abusive relationship.
Mel? This is Mel. I'm also just thinking of how things typically are, not always, but typically. Somebody has gone through a very formalized program to learn pro-tactile interpreting. There was a grant at Western Oregon University. It's a free module now online. The people that tend to be involved in the deafblind community that do deafblind camps and so forth, and other stuff, are pretty well known within, it's kind of an insular group, and it is word of mouth. And the agencies typically know who is participating in the deafblind community and have that like reputation or word of mouth of like, yes, because it's one of those really harder skills to find, especially if it's needed at a really significant level. We do have a decent deafblind population in our Chestnut Lane. There is our deaf retirement home, and there's deaf employees that work there that know those people really, really well. And this creates a way so that the people with their contact language that knows the person can, with another interpreter from, can oversee some of that too. So it's a cost benefit analysis. You give it up for the 1 or 2%, but I hear what you're saying too. Yeah.
This is Erin. So I think that just speaks to the point where, like, as someone who works in healthcare, it's really important that we still work through our agencies. Because if I am a hospital administrator and I'm like, okay, this person's a pro-tactile signer, they don't need to have a license, and this person comes to me and says that they can do it, it's kind of like a family member, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that that's okay. Like, I still need to go through my agency, and because they're gonna work with people who are vetted. And so I think just this thing could be confusing to some hospital administrative staff. So I think some, if they even know this level of the rules, like how many administrative staff are gonna look at this level? Hopefully they have language access people who can tell them what's okay and not okay. Anyway, all this information is really helpful. Thank you.
Darcy here. So that's something that could be possible. And you made a good point. I like your perspective. It makes me think. If there's a group of people who have that exemption or extenuating circumstances without a license. For example, within the deafblind community up in Washington State, there's been an issue similar to what you had mentioned where some interpreters, deafblind individuals not comfortable working with, regardless of their skill set, if they're good interpreters, the deafblind individual isn't comfortable. And there is a services center that has a list of interpreters and whether or not they're licensed that the deafblind community has accumulated and shared, and that acts as a screening process to select interpreters or not select interpreters for specific situations. So maybe if there's something where superficial skill set would be appropriate, they have someone, or something more in depth, they have an interpreter for that. So that's another idea that we could develop that would be empowering to the deafblind community to create a list of interpreters who are appropriate for that extenuating circumstance. That's an idea. So we could look at other states and model after them depending on what they're doing. And at the same time, I do like your perspective on what if there's a family member or a good friend, someone else who can interpret, siblings, extended family. That's very common within the deafblind community. And for other users of foreign languages, some hospitals will say, you know, I've been in situations where I've shown up and they use a different language process, depending on how they want that set up. So.
This is Sammy. So I'm not clear on if you're exempting somebody or having an exception to, let's use tactile and pro-tactile. How we would create
Extenuating circumstance.
How we would create a list on people who are exempt. How would we know who they are? They have to tell us that they're this. And I'm not sure that once you exempt them, that we have any authority. I'll write it down to ask, but I'm just, and I think that some of this is already out there, like, I think HCI has some kind of a list, positive, or medical, but maybe not for everything.
Amanda? This is Amanda. I don't think she was suggesting that.
Had the recording right there, I'm afraid to do my paper.
Right, so we're having.
Yeah, I scold it all the time.
No, I already knew
Can you guys still hear us?
I'm assuming there's some.
Caitlin, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Thank you.
And I did hear that it's now being recorded. So sorry for the interruption.
Thanks for letting us know.
Okay. So let me just recap. We've decided that a person does not need a license, a legal license to provide tactile and pro-tactile signage. That's what we're agreeing to, the recommendation. Are there other things in that family that you can add? I don't know what they would do, just ask them. Okay. And we'll move along to 6. And 6, you have like varying options here. So this is, like I said, a draft, and this is in relative to extenuating circumstances, and it's consumer based. So when a deaf or hard of hearing consumer needs sign language interpreting services, and the consumer, all of these things, A, B, C, D, the interpreter does not need to hold a license. So you can remove things, add things, move things to another, like only deaf interpreters follow this category. Some examples. Okay.
This is Amanda. So I would propose, we don't have to follow the Robert's Rules of Order, but I propose little b, c, it's enough. We don't need little a, etc. If we do little b and then what follows, that covers those exceptions. And then we do want to discuss a person who does not need a sign language interpretation license. I do want to discuss the addition of they need to be qualified in some fashion. I don't know how exactly you want to express that, but I think it does need to be said. But with little b and what follows, I think that covers the exceptions.
So Lori, yeah. This is Lori. I would agree with getting rid of A. I don't mind B because I think it's kind of quantitative, sort of. I'm struggling with C because who gets to decide if this person is intellectually or developmentally disabled? How do we know that?
Just to clarify, Darcy.
Can you clarify what you're speaking about, big A, little a?
Fluent in ASL, big A. I don't think that that should be an exception because my opinion is if someone is not fluent in ASL, you actually need a better interpreter than you need typically. Having an unlicensed interpreter, in my opinion, is bad. But C, I'm questioning how we would know that information.
I don't think they would.
Well, I'm a little bit lost with your comment, Lori. I'm sorry. What are you referring to? And then someone down here, was it Aaron? And then Sammy, did you go back, Aaron?
I think maybe you could put some more definitive parameters around it, but I'm not sure. And I'm not sure that if you say you're an extenuating circumstance, so you don't need a license, but you have to qualify. So I'm not sure if that will work, but like I said, I will take it away and think about it. Maybe you could put some more definitive parameters around it, but I'm not sure. And I'm not sure that if you say you're an extenuating circumstance, so you don't need a license, but you have to qualify. So I'm not sure if that will work, but like I said, I will take it away and think about it.
So this is Erin. So I heard Amanda's suggestion to get rid of little a and all the little things underneath it and only keep little b. But my question is, it says at the request of a licensee. So that means we have to have a licensee there for anything else to happen. And what if there isn't a licensee there? Like the person comes to my hospital and I don't even have anyone there yet. So then we've got these other things happening. So I think if we put it all on that, I think it's not gonna work.
This is Mel. I did say in my little note, at the request of a licensee, or at the request of a deaf consumer or a licensee. And that would allow for the deaf consumer to say, I need a deaf interpreter. I need this person who knows my language fairly well because I'm deaf blind, and this is who I know has gone through the training and has worked well with me before. It kind of empowers the deaf consumer to name, because if you look at the ADA, who defines effective communication is the consumer. And so this kind of empowers them to have a little bit, but your point about relationships and power dynamics does come into play. So again, it's that cost, that's what we do, so. Because I do agree with getting rid of little a and everything that falls after that because of what you said, Lori. We don't have an infrastructure in our state. We don't have qualified people that determine fluency in ASL in the schools and the courts. We don't have anybody. The mental health emergency, again, I agree with Lori that when we need to have more people with training and expertise. I kind of I would prefer if we all are in agreement of getting rid of little a and all the big things after that and look at little d and see how we can, if that accomplishes what we want. When we add in at the request of a deaf consumer or a licensee. I agree.
Just keep this.
Okay, I see, I follow you now. It's a little hard, looking at the page and looking at the interpreter, which one we're speaking of. Okay,
Amanda was first.
Amanda first and then Sammy.
I'm gonna use English because I wanna talk about this qualification component of it. So here was my thinking. So we don't want just any person off the street to come in who isn't licensed. We do want somebody who is qualified to work in those settings. And I was thinking of the term qualified, kind of how Mel was saying, in the federal law. Qualified is very ill-defined in ADA law as somebody who can provide effective communication. And effective communication is determined by the participants, right? So it's very, very vague, very unclear. But I wonder if there's a way to include that somehow so that we avoid abusive situations or people taking advantage of, oh, I don't need to be licensed because I'm in this particular thing. Because they still need to be able to provide effective communication, even if they're unlicensed. The reason we want the exception is so that we get better effective communication, not worse effective communication.
And Sam, hold on, we're gonna switch.
All right, Sammy.
So generally, the reason for rules is to tell people what they need to do. And so if somebody's going here and saying, am I exempt? And I have to be qualified, question mark, what makes me qualified? So, I mean, just in thinking in those terms, are there parameters around that? I don't know enough to know enough.
Well, this is Erin. To get to that, I wonder if it's because the deaf consumer is deciding, or the licensee is deciding, that means they consider that person qualified based on their own definitions. And so we don't even need to bring it up.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I want to say. The other thing is that anyway, are there any other people besides the deaf consumer or the licensee that should be able to make that decision if that deaf consumer wasn't capable of making that decision? And if so, who would that be, and who else do we need to include?
Two things. The first one, I was with you, Erin, because I think it says here, at the request, blah, 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 to join the licensee to provide effective communication and cultural linguistic competency. So I think that kind of covers it, the qualified thing. I think I'm okay with that. In your second one, I know Mel had brought up the idea of like a guardian or a representative of the individual, but I wonder if we could adopt or adjust some of the language in little a over there somehow, like at the request or when a consumer,
Oh, can I say something? Sorry.
You are.
Is that okay? Okay, great. So yes, this is Natalie. So I was just thinking, kind of like on both points. I feel like if we are able to add something about, just as guidance, it's like maybe how about if we have, like, if we exhaust all of the resources available, so that makes it so if it's a hospital, if it's a, education, that you still have to try to get an interpreter that is a qualified or licensed interpreter. But then if there's no interpreter that is qualified or licensed, then that they can continue providing the services. And then the other one, at the request of a licensee, can we also add maybe something about maybe at the request of whoever is providing the service or providing care? So like if the provider is the one that says, I feel like, there's not, the communication is not effective, we might need someone else, or maybe a different interpreter that is providing the service. So we can leave that more broad and anybody can make that decision when it's needed.
This is Lori. I feel like somehow we need to include it being an emergent situation, because coming from the school system, there are programs who have interpreters interpreting who are not licensed. currently, who do not meet the criteria for licensure currently. And I don't want that to be an option for anyone. So my preference is if we have a way to say, in a life and death situation, in a critical blah, blah, blah situation, but I want people to be held to the standards that this licensure intended to have.
So that already exists on this, in the same rule under number 1. Nothing in these rules is meant to prevent an emergency medical service provider from providing pre-hospital. And then the next one is nothing in these rules is meant to delay assistance or care in emergency situations involving imminent or immediate harm. So those are already there and they're automatic. And I would be cautious in trying to define emergent or emergency, because I
agree.
Maybe in terms of our, and
I just don't want to lose sight of that, I guess.
and those are in the law, so we can't change that.
For Bob?
Go ahead.
Me?
I was just pointing you out.
Oh, Amanda. I agree with Natalie. I would like it to be that the care provider or any of the consumers could request that, because like, I'm gonna say even the attorneys, right? Like an attorney could request to have it, somebody who's unlicensed in order to have effective communication.
This is Erin. I'm a little worried about that because I know that doctors will be like, this is an emergency. And so we're gonna work with who we have available when it's really not.
Yeah.
So I hear what Natalie is saying because we need some sort of, and I think it kind of talks to maybe what Natalie has brought up before, which is also one of my concerns with our video remote interpreters, because we prefer always to have someone in person, but we know there's a shortage and we get stuck. So I wonder if, it makes me think about this definition of the SLI license, because when I ask my vendor, they say, well, they are licensed, you know, in other states, but they don't necessarily have the Oregon license, but they have had vetting. So it's not that they're not qualified. So I think, I'm not sure if I'm asking my question or making my point very clearly, but they might be unlicensed in Oregon, but they still have those qualifications they need. So is that part of, would that be allowed based on these current rules? Or is that, maybe that doesn't have anything to do with small b, our discussion? I don't know if I'm being clear.
Yeah, I'm following you. A couple of things.
Yes, Sammy, go ahead.
Not lose sight of B is not only related to medicine.
Right.
It's all situations, schools, everything. So it's not lose sight of that, and I'll write it down, but it's my understanding that even if you're providing services out of state to somebody who's deaf, hard of hearing, or blind in Oregon, you must hold a license. So I don't know if you could, well, I know that you can't really exempt somebody that's required to have a license. Does that make sense? But
Yeah.
I'll write it down and me and Heather will look into it.
Erin, this is Mel. Erin, I'm trying to remember with the medical license, I know it's just medical, sorry, Sam. Wasn't there something we said like, you have to do due diligence to use a licensed interpreter? And in the situations where you've exhausted and there is no licensed interpreter available, we could say you then move into extenuating circumstances.
Yes.
Is that kind of?
Yes.
So, but we have to, for us, back in the day at the judicial department, I have to document. I've tried these agencies and vendors that I have on contract with me. I was declined a licensed provider in all of them. Therefore, I then moved into extenuating circumstances as allowed to use a vetted licensed interpreter in another state, BRI or whatever. Is that, and I can see how that could also apply in education when we have to use remote interpreting services as well.
Amanda, and then you.
This is Amanda. I also wonder if the BRI issue is going to be relatively short-term because they already are used to having licenses from other states. So once they know that they need a license in Oregon, they will have their vendors get licenses in Oregon. So it's kind of short-lived as long as we get the word out that they need to get their licenses, right? In terms of that BRI kind of issue.
You don't have anything, Maya?
No, my question was answered, sort of.
Sammy, did you have something?
I have a few things. I want to recap where we're at. So first thing I want to ask, and this is probably going to sound dumb. So in this draft, I have referred to deaf or hard of hearing, and I feel like I should have deafblind in there as well. Or is there one term that I've heard that just deaf with a capital D encompasses all of it, but I don't want to assume anymore.
Not anymore.
So I should say it all. Okay, that's the first question. Second question is, I think we've all agreed to delete little a. I'm not positive about that. And I feel like I would like to go through them one by one to make sure we're all on the same page. And 3, I heard Natalie say allowing lots of the providers, kind of anyone, I think, could say, nope, this is an extenuating circumstance, we need somebody in license. So, and then I heard someone say, well, if they're documenting in good faith that they tried, then, did I hear all that correctly? Okay. Sure.
This is Mel, and to Erin's point and Natalie's point as well, when we looked at the data a session ago, the people who had licensure, most of them were out of state vendors. So to Amanda's point, that is the wave. And so I think it's with an informed opinion that we can say that, it's not just made up.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify something. Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify, yeah, I meant like, for the providers and stuff like that to say, okay, yeah, we need to work with someone once resources have been exhausted. So they already tried everything and then no qualified interpreters available, then I feel like they could make a decision. Okay, we still need to make have effective communication. So just wanted to clarify, just not just in any circumstance that they could choose that is extenuating.
Amanda?
This is Amanda. I'm wondering about deaf consumer or licensee or advocate. I'm not sure if that's the word I want to use, but somebody who would be asking on their behalf. So if they are, in the hospital and they are not able to advocate for themselves, or I know that in court, sometimes the lawyer is the one who says, I don't think this interpretation is working. I think we need someone else to come in and, help to mitigate this miscommunication that's happening, right? It wouldn't be the deaf client themselves who would say that necessarily, or know that they could even ask for it, but an advocate on their behalf. And I don't know if that's the right word, because again, that could be a term of art, as Sammy said, or a technical term, but something where.
Representative?
Maybe, yeah.
What would it be in education?
Who advocates in education?
Administrator.
That's a big bag. It's a big bag of tricks. So is it CODA, SODA, administrator, doctor, nurse, me? I mean, I keep it off, but just because I'm a boss. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we gotta, I mean, I don't think there's a limit on who can request it, but you want to make sure that you're not, I think, you could say anybody, I can definitely check on that, but it sounds like you don't want that necessarily. You want to corral it from there.
Okay, go ahead and switch interpreters. And they're done, Maya. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, okay. I think it's really important that we make a statement or something under these exemptions that all resources have been exhausted to use a license in Oregon.
Under what line? I'm sorry.
Oh, just under the exemptions, I think it's important to state that a licensed Oregon interpreter has been exhausted. All resources have been used, whether it be legal, educational, healthcare, because competency, especially in healthcare, is extremely important to make sure, like, there's a reason why there are medical interpreters who understand the terms that a doctor would say to translate those into layman's terms. I don't think we should overlook that as a requirement.
This is Erin. I think similar maybe to what Maya is saying, maybe we get rid of the in the following extenuating circumstances and just say, you know, at the request of a deaf consumer or licensee, blah, blah, blah. Or when we've made all efforts to find a licensed sign language interpreter and none is available. Would that be, is that getting to your point?
Yeah, Oregon license, I think.
Yeah.
And then goes down the web from there.
Mel? Mel or?
This is Mel, I think.
I'm wondering if that could be like its own, like number, if we're gonna get rid of number, like it could be number 6 says, when all Oregon licensed interpreters has been exhausted. And then 7, like make it its own.
Amanda?
This is Amanda. Is this not the exception area where we're getting deaf interpreters to work in medical and legal settings? Right, so how do you exhaust all licensed people to get to the point when if there's a specific deaf interpreter that you, or a specialized interpreter that you're like, I need that one, and they're not licensed, but I need that one? Okay, that's fine. I want to make sure that we're using the exception for what we need it for also.
So a couple things. I heard what you said, and I'm wondering if you can somehow put some parameters around documenting. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I think it's doable. I think that gets to kind of the safety aspect that you've done everything you can do, and now we need somebody else. And then to your point, I think that if somebody's like, I need this person, then that would be for first to communicate in a non-standard ASL or a unique dialect of ASL. Maybe that's where that falls in.
But I think we're getting rid of that.
Well, I know, that argues though. That's why I wanted to circle back and make sure.
Okay. Yeah, it could be big B.
Covered.
Is that big B under little a?
No, it's
Under little b.
It's, no. It's a B under little a.
Christy? Erin and Christy.
This is Erin. I think if I'm understanding you, if someone's like, I want that person, I think that already falls into at the request of a deaf consumer.
I see.
Right? And then I think to answer your question, if we put like a number 7, when all, I don't actually know if I have the answer, when all SLI licensed people have been exhausted, and are you saying that we need to have some language that says, and we've documented that we've tried? Is that what you're saying for the safety part, that we need to include that language?
My wonder is, you were talking about, how do we determine if somebody's developmentally disabled? How is someone going to determine that you've documented all exhaustive measures? Because I don't know.
Right.
So I'm just thinking to myself,
Right.
will this come up? Will there be a complaint? Do we even have authority over the complaint? I have lots of questions.
Yeah.
But I think we can add that in, and I don't think you have to really define document, as long as you've got it documented, I think that's enough, but I'm gonna write it down and check.
Well, is it okay if I say some one more thing to that? You know, the House Bill 2359 for medical interpreters already has, House Bill 2359 already has this expectation of documentation, but that's in the medical field. So documentation would then be expected, it sounds like, in all these other circumstances, but I feel like there's a precedent for that sort of a thing already.
Yeah.
So we
Because
might
I
be
could
able
say-
to borrow some sort of language from that.
Absolutely, I already wrote it down.
I sent it to you too, Sammy.
Sorry, this is Christy. My wondering is if we're adding the phrase, when all other measures have been exhausted, that means that we aren't able to say we want that person. We have to go through the process of saying we don't have a qualified person. So we still haven't figured out a pathway, I don't think, to be able to say, we want this person and we're not going to go through all of the exhaustive, right?
Well, that's why you might want to keep little a.
This is Mel, hold on a second.
Erin or
Maya.
In response to that, I think they should be, if someone comes in needing interpretation and they have their person, they believe that that person is competent, that's up to them. I think as a patient, whatever situation they're in, I think that is up to them. If they have somebody that they truly believe is competent, number two would be the other option that we have exhausted all organ licenses.
And
I know I opened the can of worms, and now I'm gonna look closer at the can of worms. Sometimes consumers don't know what we do, and they don't know the training we have. So they might think so-and-so is a qualified person in setting A, but now that they're in the ER, they're no longer qualified. So I do want the hospitals, the schools, the courts to exhaust licensed people in some ways, before they then put in somebody that just is like, this is my neighbor, this is my friend, because they don't know what they don't know. We're the experts in the field, so we have some responsibility for that piece. And when you are requesting a deaf interpreter and you exhaust all licensees, then you can move on to unlicensed deaf interpreters, because that's still in the subset of that skill set of being culturally responsive and having the ability to interpret it on. You know what I mean? It's not all licenses. It's within the group of the 5 certified deaf interpreters we have in the state. That opens the door for that after that. So that does correct switching the roles of the order.
Amanda?
It's Amanda. I just want to make sure that we are not saying Sally on the street can come in and interpret for this doctor's appointment as long as we've checked that no one else is available.
That's what you're saying.
I don't like that.
100%.
I don't want that.
As long as the consumer requests it, that's what you're saying.
I don't want that. Because Sally, what does she know? No offense to any Sallys.
Don't hire Sandy, because I don't know anything.
Yeah, I'll use Sammy as an example, right? So what I'm saying is, like, I think we're creating a loophole for providers to be like, yeah, we tried and we couldn't get anybody. So my receptionist, she took a sign language class and she came in and interpreted for the doctor's appointment instead of rescheduling it to get a qualified interpreter, right? So I just feel like we're getting into scary territory if we don't define qualified in some way.
But remember, we're talking about emergent situations.
No, we're not.
We're talking about all
Nope.
situations.
So maybe we need to talk about emergencies.
We should talk about that. It's already in the law.
Right.
It's already an exception.
Right. So you're saying that and.
No, I'm saying that by itself is, you don't have to have a license if there
If it's
is.
Right.
it's an emergency.
But now we're
situation.
talking about a bigger
An exception.
exception. Maybe exceptions are only in emergent situations, is what I'm saying.
Well, so you would get rid of all of 5?
I don't know.
Darcy here.
Because,
Just a second.
Darcy hears.
But let me play, this is Darcy speaking, let me play devil's advocate for a minute. From the deaf community's perspective, if they request an interpreter tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, you're exhausting your options, you're in the process of that. We've already arrived at the appointment time. And those within the extenuating circumstances group haven't all been contacted, gone through that process yet. They're not available by the time of that appointment. It might take too much time to go through that process. And then deaf and hard of hearing individuals, deaf blind individuals would go without an interpreter, even if it's not an emergency situation. They would show up and there's just no interpreter because it took an extended amount of time to go through that process of finding an interpreter. I myself have experienced that multiple times, showing up, no interpreter, I have to reschedule or continue for a variety of appointments, not just medical, just in general. So I want to be very careful and provide support to the deaf community and their perspective in limiting the language of how we describe that. My 2 cents. Amanda or Lori or Christy, pardon me. Amanda, you're. Go ahead. Okay. All the interpreters were talking at the same time. Wasn't sure what I was doing wrong. What was I saying?
So then, the view of the deaf community, you already have limited options, et cetera. Do you feel that we should be more broad in our exceptions? Like, would you want Sally to come just to, barely do enough to interpret? Would you allow that scenario in the law? Or would you rather reschedule? What would be a better accommodation in your view, based on your comment?
It depends on the individual, it depends on the deaf person.
So if the individual requests this person as an exception, then that should be enough?
That's a great question. I don't have an opinion about that specifically for an extenuating circumstance, but you need a well-rounded perspective, and I don't want the language to limit that.
Correct.
Christy and then Sammy. Oh, Sammy.
So I want to also point out in little b, I don't know that we've read the entire thing. So at the request, I've added licensee or a deaf or hard of hearing or deaf blind consumer. When an unlicensed sign language interpreter is necessary to join with the licensee to provide. So everybody understands that it's not alone an unlicensed, that person is joined with the licensee. I want to just point that out. Because I don't know that that's where everybody wants to be. That becomes more limited.
So, yes. And again, it's not only requesting a licensee, it's deaf individuals, interpreting agencies that place person without having prior, or maybe they do have prior knowledge of the deaf or deaf blind individual's needs. And they have been providing interpretation services historically, so we could add agencies to that list. Some agencies are not that good in that respect, others are, so there's that. Go ahead, Sadie.
We could add something like, I think of a good word, but whatever word I find, representative, including but not limited to, and you could give some examples.
Including what?
Including but not limited to, give some examples, and then maybe they have to be similar to that. It's one option. 2 is, yes, I think that there's room for that, but I still want to make sure everyone understands is to join with a licensee. Because I'm not sure that everyone got that.
Yes.
Okay. Did Darcy get it?
This is Christy. I was just saying that doesn't really get to the heart of what we're trying to do, because now we need a licensed person and a second person, when the real problem is we couldn't find a licensed person and we want this person who's unlicensed.
Amanda?
This is Amanda. So I think there are two separate things here. One is that we want deaf interpreters who are unlicensed. Maybe they have other qualifications, but that would partner with a licensed person, and would that satisfy what we're looking for? The little BS situation. And a second scenario is the lack of availability of licensed interpreters. But maybe we have another interpreter who hopefully would be qualified, who could be placed in that situation. We want that person to work alone, not alongside a licensee. So I think we need little a and little b, but I think little a needs to look different for when it's a single person working alone as an unlicensed. But for B, I think that covers deaf interpreters in most scenarios.
I also want to be clear that this, hold on, rule is not limited to deaf interpreters. Okay. Yep. Because what I'm hearing, what I just heard you say is that it is. So I don't know that I'm hearing it accurately, so I need help with that.
So this is Amanda. I wasn't saying only deaf interpreters, but I was saying it covers that exception that we've been trying to talk about. Like, what about? Say that again?
We could do a separate deaf interpreter rule about extenuating circumstances, if that's what you want to get to.
I'm not sure that we would need to, because I'm not necessarily saying only deaf people would be the second person that I might. So if I showed up as a licensee and I needed particular assistance, it might be from a hearing interpreter who has that expertise, but it might also be from a deaf interpreter who has that expertise. And I'm saying I think little b covers that. So not just deaf interpreters are covered under little b, because I also want to be able to call in another person who might fit that. But it would cover the examples that we've talked about so far that would require a deaf interpreter.
And a licensee.
And a licensee, correct, yeah. But wouldn't have to be exclusively a deaf interpreter.
But I do want to make sure that everybody is in agreement with that.
Just one moment for the interpreters to switch.
This is Erin. I admit I didn't hear the full thing, and
One will be hard.
I've got to think.
To hear her and watch you, I'm not getting all of the context, just so you know.
Okay. What would be helpful?
You to speak. For me.
So if I am understanding clearly what you're speaking of specifically, a licensee, so let's say they want to bring in a deaf interpreter and work together as a team. That falls under little b. Okay, little b, yeah. And then little a needs an interpreter brought in to work alone. So I'm wondering then if, let's say, a deaf interpreter is brought in unlicensed, they come into the job and maybe using VRI, would that satisfy this regardless if the VRI interpreter is unlicensed? That's the question. So, but if they have a skill in working with this deaf consumer, so they qualify in that regard, but they're unlicensed, and they go through VRI as their team.
I'm gonna sign for a little bit, and then I'm gonna switch to English for a little bit.
Okay, so this is Amanda. So your example, I think that the VRI interpreter wouldn't be acceptable because they should be licensed. They should be licensed because, you know, like that wouldn't qualify for any sort of exception.
So I'm gonna switch to English. Try to explain what I was saying before, which is what you just said. Did she clear it up for you guys? What I was saying before? No.
It's really, for me, personally, my brain doesn't work this way.
Sure.
And I will definitely go back and re-listen.
No, it's totally fine.
I don't get it when I'm hearing her and watching you.
Okay, okay. So what I was saying is, I think what Christy brought up was two separate issues. We do want exceptions for people where a licensee calls in a second person who has some sort of expertise. We do want that, so that's little b. We want that, we want them to work with a licensee, and that would cover deaf interpreters. But there's also this other category of if there are not enough interpreters available, we've exhausted everything, and we actually want somebody who is unlicensed to come in and work alone. In which case I was saying, I think we might need little a, but to rewrite it in a different way.
No, now I got it.
Okay.
Now I got it. What if little a said, that extenuating circumstances is
Tried all to get a license, we didn't find any, and then we could use an agency, meaning they've been through paperwork, they've been filtered, like they're on the street, it's not just someone on the street. Keep that kind of protection there. An agency that we could add something to that, some sort of, you know what I mean? Like, because I want to respect your perspective, Amanda. And how do we figure this out? How do we say, so all Oregon licensees, we tried to find them, they were exhausted, and then there's an extenuating circumstance where we can use a non-licensed interpreter requested from an agency or something like that? Amanda. This is Amanda. I kind of want to backtrack a little bit and explain what I just said in sign language to make sure everybody's understanding correctly. So, Christy, previously her comment was, so if we've tried to get a licensed interpreter, there's none available, we want to be able to grab someone who is not yet licensed to work alone in a situation. They don't have a license, and they don't have a licensed person with them. And at the same time, we want an exception for people who, we kind of envision deaf interpreters in this role, someone with specialized skill. It can be a hearing person too, or a hearing interpreter, but we want an interpreter that already has a license, and they show up to a situation, they assess it, and they say, you know what? I need to pull in someone else to work with me. And so that is under little b, right? So this other one, the little a, we need to rewrite to fit the situation where we have an unlicensed person working alone. So that kind of goes with what Mel was just saying. We've tried to find, we couldn't find a licensed interpreter, so now we're going to backup plan. So what language, whatever, HB, House Bill 23, whatever you said, what language is in there? So if we've tried the registry list, and then what do? What language did they use to show, to say, hey, we couldn't find someone from the list, so then we have this backup plan. Could we borrow the language from that healthcare interpreter registry thing?
So this is Erin, and I don't have that. We can look it up.
I have
it. It talks about a good faith effort. Sammy has it. And maybe I'm simplifying this too much, but I just wonder if we just need to say we can work with someone who doesn't have a SLI license if the deaf consumer or licensee says we need one.
Oh.
Or we tried everything and there absolutely is no one there, and the deaf consumer gave us permission to work with that person. Can we make it that simple?
And just have b, little b.
Get rid of all the letters and just have this one and that one and not all these other things, because I feel like it's making it really confusing.
Say for me again.
So let me restate it. So we could get rid of all the letters underneath 6 and just go with a person does not need an SLI license under blah, blah, blah to provide if the at request of the deaf consumer or licensee, or B, when we've exhausted all options and the deaf consumer gives us permission to work with a non-licensed person. Yeah, we made a good faith effort, so we could borrow maybe some language from that House bill. Does that simplify it too much, or does that feel like that gets to what we're discussing? Oh, I'm sorry, Maureen.
Yes, my only concern is what if the deaf consumer is not able to communicate that request?
Right, well, if they're out of it, then we can't talk to them at all.
Well, if they are able to see
Right.
in order to get information, they
Right.
may not be able to express that.
So they're conscious, right?
I don't.
So,
It could be
well,
like a
I mean.
1% right thing, right? But
We've tried to get the license. Right, we've already tried that.
so then it falls into that.
Okay, because we've exhausted. So if they're in the hospital, they're gonna try to find it.
Right.
Let me
take it all back.
So everyone's understanding this, let's take it, and then we're gonna fiddle with it, with what's in the parameters of the law.
Yes.
So this may come out differently. And I'm not sure we could use good faith effort, because I believe that's in their statute, but I think we could use something similar.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so. This is it, but I've got what you want.
Yeah, this is Erin. I think what was tripping us up was to join with the lease licensee. I think that was really limiting us. As soon as you take that out, then you have those different situations that you can pull out.
This is Melody, say it one more time.
Okay. A person does not need a SLI license under ORS, blah, 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 to provide sign language interpretation services if the deaf consumer or licensee requests an unlicensed SLI, or when all attempts to find an SLI have been exhausted.
You need to bring in the extenuating circumstance. So why? Because that's how you're getting this rule. Is only because there is that law
Okay.
that allows.
A person does not need that in the following extenuating circumstances.
And is it an extenuating circumstance?
I'm confused now.
She'll do it. Not you. Sammy will fight it. Okay.
But Mel, did that help?
So then, if I understand you correctly, you're saying get rid of 6 and change the wording? No?
Okay. This is Amanda, change the wording of 6, yes.
Keep. Okay. And keep it, just adjust the language. Okay. This is Erin. So yeah, keep 6, but then the 2 options under 6 are just gonna be the deaf consumer gets to choose, or the licensee gets to choose, or we've exhausted all options and we have no other choice but to work with someone who's not licensed, as long as the deaf consumer gives permission for us to do that.
I'm going dark. So I want the power to be triaged like this. When all licensees have been, like, there's none out there. And then the deaf consumer gives permission.
Yes.
Right, so it has to be if this,
Yes.
then that.
Yes.
Not just.
That's not what I have.
That's why I went dark. Because there is the situations out there where people, we just have to have it that way, right? Like, if we've exhausted and then the deaf consumer
That's not
requests.
how I have it written.
And let me give an explanation then.
No, it's totally fine. I go back, I'm clarifying. We're not arguing. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, yes. I wonder how we do that though, because the first one says that the deaf consumer can request, and we want them to if they want a specialized deaf interpreter or something like that. But we don't want them to if it's just to get around using a licensed person, right? So how do we get those two to say what we want them to say?
And this is Mel. Because in current federal law, court law, deaf people do not have a right to name the interpreter they want. They have a right to request access to effective communication. And there's a lot of reasons that's there, and some of that is because we know as service providers what some consumers might not know. So that piece I want to keep and protect that. And then also create the space where the deaf consumer requests. Yeah, but again, if we exhaust all licensed interpreters, and let's say, for example, it is the deaf interpreter, so the 4 aren't available, then we can use DIs without the request of the deaf consumer. Because it's if this, right? So that this then becomes the situation.
This is the interpreters we're gonna switch. That's what we were trying to say, right? Like, this is going on.
Aaron, Sammy, did that make sense? Did all that make
Honestly, I
sense?
did not hear any of that.
Okay.
Because I was busy reading Teams.
Oh, pizza's ready.
No, it's not.
Oh, no, it's not. Did you see that face? It's not looking good.
Darcy here. So I have a question. So just make sure I'm kind of understanding. So the A, B stuff, right? So the little a and the little b. So right now, are we talking about the need to include language that says, where'd it go? Darn. The extenuating circumstance include, and then do we need to, so that's the language that we're needing to include in this? I just want to make sure, did I misunderstand something?
This is Aaron. I think, if I understand you, you are understanding it. So we need to include that language in the following extenuating circumstances, and then we give those examples. Because those examples are those extenuating circumstances. That's what I understood.
So meaning we keep all of them, right? We can't like get rid of them all, like we said. Like we have to have like, fluent ASL, mental
No.
health emergency, that.
No, the only extenuating circumstances are the 2 things we said about the deaf consumer gets to choose, the deaf consumer or the licensee gets to choose. That's one. And the second one is we've exhausted everything, there's nothing left. But the deaf consumer has approved us after we've exhausted it to use who we've found.
Thank you. Okay, got it. Sammy.
So if I'm thinking about what an extenuating circumstance is, it's not your everyday thing. So is it just because a consumer requested it or a licensee, make it an exception? Does that alone make it extenuating circumstance? My guess is no, but I'm going to ask.
This is Mel. What I want the extenuating circumstance to be is when we've exhausted all other resources and there's no licensed interpreters available. Then you move into extenuating circumstance, and you can use an unlicensed interpreter that the licensee may or may request, or the deaf consumer request. It's not just any situations. After we've exhausted the pool, then we move into that category of being able to open the door to using an unlicensed interpreter. And
I think so.
Oh, my.
So we're setting a prerequisite. You must do this first. If you cannot do this, A, B, C, or A, B fall under the umbrella of this is what you tried to do first. Am I understanding that correctly?
The extenuating circumstance is we've exhausted all resources. Okay. Therefore, you can use an unlicensed interpreter.
And then it's those two things.
This is Darcy. Just one example that I'd like to throw out. Let's say we have a deaf individual and they only know sign language, foreign sign language. That's what they use to communicate. So now there's one licensed deaf interpreter. Unlicensed. So that requests this unlicensed interpreter And I feel like, does that trump all of the other things that they need to go through before they can use that interpreter?
If there's only one interpreter who knows the language, then you've already looked and that's it.
Still fits.
Yeah, I think it still fits.
Amanda?
So this is Amanda, and I think I'm gonna talk to Aaron's face. Because I think what you're saying is essentially a deaf interpreter or a hearing interpreter is not an exemption. It's not an extenuating circumstance. I can show up and I can say, oh, as an interpreter, I request a deaf interpreter, or they can request a deaf interpreter, whatever. And we're assuming we're gonna get licensed ones, right? So we've already established we need a hearing interpreter and we need a deaf interpreter, and they should be licensed. But when I go to look for those people, I go through all the licensed people and I don't have them. So then I can go to the unlicensed deaf or hearing interpreters in that situation who would fit that situation. So I think I'm with you. Did that help at all to your face?
I think when I made this is Erin.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think why I made that face was because if I'm understanding you correctly, Mel, you want us to exhaust first and then have the deaf consumer or the licensee make the decision. Is that what you're saying? Because that to me puts that over the deaf consumer making their own choice. And I feel like the deaf consumer should have their own choice. Like if they say that they want this person, and then why can't we let them do that? Or if the licensee person wants to work with this person, why can't we do that? And then if that's not the situation and there's no one involved, no one's shown up, it's just us as providers, and we're at the second situation where it's in advance and I've tried everyone, nobody's available except for Sally.
Poor Sally.
And I call up Samantha, and Samantha's like, yeah, I can work with Sally, that's okay with me. Like that would be the other circumstance. So I may have just misunderstood what you were saying.
So because sometimes consumers don't know what they don't know, and it could be in an odd power dynamic, I think it's prudent to say we've tried licensed, trained professionals.
Okay.
None of them are available. And then you can make your own. I don't even think necessarily I like that piece, but it's like we've tried them all, now we can use licensed or unlicensed. It may be who the deaf person requested, it may not be. Right, that piece, actually now I feel like, because in most of the world, a deaf consumer doesn't, like my world, because I do court, you don't get to choose your interpreter. They have to be neutral and provided by a certain entity. The consumer picking their own interpreter, they can have a preferred list of who they work well with. And then the hospitals or the schools or whoever can choose to follow that or not. But we want to create the potential for the hospital, the school to be able to say no, because I happen to know this person is shady, they're not trained, they have a racket going on the side, and they pay the deaf people on the side to ask for them. I'm making up stories, right? But this has happened. It's true. It's happened in Oregon. So there has to be a little bit of a safeguard there for the institutions to say no. For whatever reason.
Access.
Yeah, we provide access. You can make your preferred list known to us, and as a coordinator, I would probably follow that, but some places, for whatever the reasons, and they might not know how to pay this person, they might not be a paid vendor. I mean, there's a lot of things that come into play if they're not in the system, so.
Oh, can I say something? Yeah. Okay, sorry, it's because I've had my hand up. So I just want to say that I am with Mel on this one as well, because I feel like, we've had situations where we have family members or patients that come in with their family member, and when we try to offer to have interpreter services, like a qualified interpreter, a certified interpreter, they're like, oh no, I want to work with my family member. So something that we rely on is on the House Bill 2359, where it says that we need to exhaust all of the resources before we have family members or friends interpret. And so I feel like, again, if they have any preferred interpreters that they like, we can take those into consideration and see if we can get those scheduled. But if not, then that will be like the only reason I would say to have family members or friends who are not qualified provide that service. And, in my mind, I always go to, in my mind, where I'm always thinking of, okay, we're going to provide qualified interpreters. The difference is between if they're going to be licensed in Oregon or not, but I feel like they should all be qualified in a way. And I think Erin mentioned this before, like, the ones that work with agencies or the VRIs, they have been vetted before. They work already as medical interpreters, and even though they don't have a license in Oregon, they do have the qualifications needed. So I feel like just opening that way of saying if we've exhausted all resources, then we can then work with whoever they have families or friends or anything like that that would be able to provide it. But that would be, I would say, the last resort. I would try to do VRI first and then the family member or friend. So wanted to mention that.
Go ahead. And if they want to bring a family member or interpreter of their choice, that's fine. It's still our due diligence to find them a qualified interpreter, but that's up to them to have them there, whether it's PHI or whatever. But we're not denying them that choice, but we're also making sure that there is someone who is qualified, competent, and licensed there to make sure any gaps are filled or any questions may be needed to ask. I think that it's not, I don't think it has to be in the bullet points of this, but it's something that we can educate on as well.
So for rewriting Erin's wonderful rewrite, it's basically when all licensed interpreters have been exhausted. And then,
So this is Christie, so that's not an or. It's not this or this. It's just this.
and that keeps the safeguards in place that I've been hearing around the table.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to propose a break for interpreters.
I know. We're waiting.
Supposed to be here 12:30.
The recording started.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Sammy, do we need to start?
Yeah, started, the recording is starting. You guys want to go back to the, you're good. Move on to that, make sure I got, wait, now. 6 would be, you don't have to be licensed if you've exhausted all ways to get a licensed person to do sign language interpreting. And if you have documented it somehow, then a consumer licensing can request an unlicensed person. That's the spirit of what I'm thinking. Okay. And then leaving 6 little b alone. Or do we even need 6 little b anymore?
You could just need that.
All we need is 6, and the stuff you just said.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Well, any other, okay, so that pretty much covered. Okay. So now let's go to generalist license. And relook at that. Starts on page 17. And really starts on page 19. And it's trying to eat all of your pathways. And at the last meeting, you wanted me to add all of the certificates on our website, to the list, which I've done. And then I think this one's done. I think. Do you guys have any questions about it? I think it's fairly straightforward. Exams that you can take, credential that you might have, and then experience in exam. Okay. Moving right along. I added the definitions in here, and this is kind of just the tally that I've been using as we go. So I add these off of here all the time. But it's just here for you to reference. And then the provisional license on, starting on page 26, the RAC fire license on November 13th. We finalized that in third draft, not that we won't use it again, but. And it has similar pathways. A degree, exam, and education and training. And then competencies in ASL and English. And kind of defining that, what those competencies mean. Any questions about that? Which page is that? Starts on page 26. Yeah, 26. He's just reviewing what we've already done. What was that? But it starts with 26 and it goes 27 to like 31. So 29 is the start of the rule for requirements to get a provisional license. Okay. Just a second. 26 or 29, sorry. You said both 26 and 29, so what page again? All of the pages that are in regards to the sign language provisional license. Beginning on page 26 and going through page 33. Which we've already completed. I was just giving a scenario for the new members. Comments. And then the last one that we did was the supervisor requirements to supervise the sign language interpreter. And that talks about what type of license you have to have and things like that when it, after, it talks about several things. How often you have to meet with the provisional, and kind of what those requirements are for supervision. Documentation. So we can try and engage what we're going to do at the next meeting. So it could be defining settings, or renewal requirements for each license. Are there specialty licenses that may apply? I don't know if there are.
I'm sorry, I was reading. What did you say?
Oh, I'm just trying to get a direction for the next one, which is on May 28th.
Darcy here. Just want to make sure that I'm understanding all the rules. Sorry, let me back up a little bit here. So all the different licenses, just reading through the updated clean copy that we have here. Now we are just discussing this morning about, the emergency, the extenuating circumstances. Where is that going to be put in this list of licenses and thing? I just want to make sure that I'm clear on where that information this morning, where that is going to be in the list.
In the current rule, it's
Yes,
right after
go ahead.
definitions. So we'll go definitions, other circumstances. I think it's called general administration. I can't remember. Direction.
What are the options again? I'm really sorry. My
I'm
brain is this.
renewal requirements, we did the medical license, legal license, education license. You think there's a specialty license that we should think about? And given some of those ideas, and I can work with Heather, see if they would fit that. Or, I mean, really, is there practice standards that you want to have, that you don't see in your rules currently?
Darcy, I guess I just need more time to read through them again and think about, if anything pops up or if I notice something that is a little odd. Erin, did you have something? Sorry, Erin.
Yeah, no, that's fine. This is Erin. So it sounds like in these previous meetings, y'all have finalized the language around the supervisory license and the general list and the provisional. And what's left is educational, medical, and legal.
Correct.
So I wonder if we want to just start in order, because educational is next in the statute. So do we just want to start with educational next?
Yeah.
And then make our way down the list? Is that what we're trying to decide?
Yeah.
That's what I vote for. What does everybody else think?
That's good. And I already have, we actually did some work on this before the school year started in 2024. I don't remember when.
24.
Yeah, and the board didn't like it, but they gave us some ideas of what they would rather have. So I already have some of that done. Like getting the 4.0 on the EIDA, I think was one, and stuff like that. Because backtrack, the RAC had considered, brought to the board, I brought to the board for the RAC, having basically giving somebody their education license, even if we didn't have their EIPA score, because they're backed up so far, they're backed out, they're grading the EIPA from tests taken April of 2024. So, yeah, so we put that to the board and they said, no, deaf students are, really important, they need to have somebody licensed. So we didn't do that. But I already have that rule, so yeah, that was the background. I don't know if it made any sense.
Yeah, it did.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I think that makes
Start with
sense.
that. Okay. So, I mean, we're ahead of the game. This is unusual. So I always put on here.
No?
Were you first?
I was just gonna thank our new members because I think that you're making us better. Because look how fast we went through this. So good. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, appreciate it.
I was just gonna thank y'all, y'all have been meeting for a long time, like.
This is our 11th meeting.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah.
Just all the work that you've done to get us to this point is, I mean, I've been through some of these processes before and it takes forever, so thank you all for all the work you've done to get us to this point.
In our defense, there was a large learning curve on both sides. Like, they didn't know stuff about rules, I didn't know stuff about the deaf community or how to work with them or even the interpreter arena. So, those definitely some trying times, we got through it. Good.
I was just gonna say thank you. It was nice to get out of LaGrange. And I've learned a lot. And it kind of broadens my scope and horizon. What I do and just the ins and outs. And what others are struggling with, so we're not struggling with. So it's been.
We met 9 times.
Okay.
What was that said? What did you say? 9 times. Oh, 9
meetings. Actually here. And then, so for the next meeting, maybe provide us with, before the meeting, the educational, the medical, and the legal information, right? Like a rough draft, so we could review that maybe and kind of get a picture before the meeting. That way, you know, we can put ideas down while we're reading it, because just so we could be more prepared. Could we do that? That would be very helpful for me to be able to read it before, like to see what's already included and some of the changes already there. Yes, Sam?
So I just need some clarification. So this was all sent in advance of the meeting and it had drafts of everything we talked about today. So is there something that we need to do instead of getting it? You need to get to you sooner, or because it sounds like Darcy didn't get it or she's in a different way. I just want to make sure everybody's getting what they need.
I guess I have to look back at prior meetings, you know, like which draft was that, you know, I guess I just want a confirmation of like the official versus a draft or the edited ones. That's been my confusion.
So I think, so you're getting the emails with the documents, but like you need, like this is finished across it, like I have it at the top. Maybe this needs to be, so it's done with draft.
Oh, okay.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That helps.
So do you want me to talk about educational license?
We're doing
We're just talking about what we want to do next time.
Yes, and making sure that everyone's getting what they need when we're saying it.
So I think next time I want to define medical settings and legal settings.
Well, everybody else wants to do the education license.
Did I already do education? No.
Were you not
Weren't
listening
paying
now?
Sorry.
Remember how they rejected us? The board rejected our educational proposal? So we have to do it again.
Oh.
I mean, you could talk about,
But we could have all 3 of those as
you could talk about
potential.
education setting in the education license. And that's fine. Or we could start with something different. I don't have preference.
Put that down.
Well, if you want to have a draft, I gotta know what I'm drafting.
This is Amanda. Do we think it's plausible to potentially handle settings next time, educational, legal, and medical? Or be prepared to talk about them?
It feels weird if you don't have what the licensee is required to do before you go to setting. That's just how my mind works. So that doesn't
Wait,
mean-
say that one more time.
If you don't know what the requirements are for them to be a medical licensee or legal licensee or education licensee, it's hard for me to put in perspective what the setting is. I don't even know what they're required, how they're required to get licensed. But
Okay, so can we do educational, medical, and legal licenses next time?
you think you can do all 3?
No, I'm saying be prepared for.
Absolutely.
Because what if we're just like speedy quick? Look at these 2 new people. They're making us fast.
Let's be very clear.
I'll have all 3 ready. I mean, worst case scenario, I'll just get what I've already got in the rule. It's a starting point.
This is Erin. How far in advance do you usually send the documents?
We try to do a week. This time it was not a week because other extenuating circumstances.
Did it match one of the rules?
Well, there were some meetings that had to take place. But yes, we will, I think.
My recommendation, if possible, is like even this week, you know what I mean? Like, because that way, because it takes a long time to go through this stuff. And, well, actually, when are we meeting next? We're not meeting for several months, right?
No.
So,
May 28th.
okay, so I mean, ideally, I don't know what the group thinks, but ideally 3 or 4 weeks to have lots of time because it's so dense to look through. But I don't know what people think about that or if that's realistic for your team to be able to do it that far in advance.
I'm a lone cowboy.
Okay.
Just me.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can try 2 weeks.
Okay, 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Does that work for people? Okay. Thank you, Sammy.
Yeah. This is the interpreter's for switch.
If anything, I can give you part of it. You can start with, you know, digesting it, then you come in a second. Well, that, I mean, that's definitely.
Thank you.
I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Senate Bill 950.
So what elephant?
So if that, and whenever that is, becomes a thing and passes, which it probably will, when will we know that? Just for our timeline on working on things, because it could impact all of this. Like, I don't necessarily want to spend a couple of days on this. I mean, I would for you guys, of course, but do we know that timeline so that we can maybe work on things that won't impact? Is that what we're request?
Hard to say, because they could amend what's there now, so I have no way of knowing.
The third reading is today.
No, it already happened.
On the Senate side.
And then it goes to the
It already
House.
happened, I think, you just did the day before.
That was today.
They had 2 things, yeah, 2
Anyway.
things, you're both right.
If the House changes something, I don't know. Well, hard to say. If it is the way it is right now, then I think you would have, I think you have to start rulemaking in September, but I don't know that for sure. And then have rules in place by January 1st.
Can we do this before, and we're really upset about that timeline?
I don't know.
Amanda? I have a procedural question. We are currently on the rack for the current MBOBs. If it passes and there's a new rules that need to be written starting in September, and we haven't finished our recommendations, do those just come to us or do you start a new rack?
No, we would not start a new rack.
What if we were done? What if we were done?
Would not be the start of, well, if there's changes to the law, you're not done.
I live here now? I didn't realize.
This is not a voluntary committee.
So, and
Okay.
if there's changes to the law, which that we've already done, that isn't applying more, then garbage or a change, then change. Sorry. That's just what I did today. Could change.
Can I just comment for those that are new, you may not know, the educational. Sorry, this is Kristen. Under the new Senate Bill 950, which amends the original law, which is what we're working on, it takes out educational interpreters.
And medical.
And so legal.
And legal.
So, yeah, the discussion is, we wouldn't need to have the conversation necessarily if it's not.
That's up to you guys to decide how you want to move forward.
And just a historical note for you all as well, there was frustration on the timelines of things of like, it was supposed to be enacted in January, but we didn't even have the rules, we didn't even have a rules committee, and then we, so all of those kinds of timeline things are, like theoretically from September to January, we're supposed to make all the rules.
We're on month 9.
Of apparently $1 trillion or something?
No, we're on month 13, just like 10. We started in March of 2020.
We all didn't know when we signed up.
I didn't realize it was a life sentence.
I didn't
So if this new bill passes, and then this one is basically trashed, and we start over with a new board rep, or do we carry over and just start developing new rules for the new bill? What's the process look like?
Only certain, so currently in place is the statutes for the board. Not all of those go away. There's some that are repealed, go away, and there's some that change, amend, and there's some that are brand new. So this committee would continue the work. Maybe some of the work you did doesn't apply anymore, so throw it out. Maybe you have to do requirements for one thing we've already done, so we've got to add it back in. So things like that. So in my mind, we will continue with this RAC, and if we subject matter experts along the way, we'll add them as needed. And sometimes I just don't know what I don't know. And it's, the Hospital Association of Oregon was nice enough to recommend you guys. And so that's what really is helpful.
Yeah.
So I think we just move forward with all three of them and assume that everything is status quo and we'll go on forward. Because technically, the three licenses don't become invalid, stay valid until 2029. But we're not exactly sure. Don't think you continue to obtain that license, though anyone who has it for 2029, and then there's some authority to define settings for those three. So I'm unsure of all of how I'm a lawyer. So what? I'm a lawyer. So yeah. There may still be relevance even if they repeal this. So some of this may still apply. Okay. Any other questions? All righty. I always put on here the fiscal impact and equity statement, but I think I like to wait actually until that's all the way down and then go through them rule by rule. Otherwise, it's public comment time. Yes. Oh, here we go. At this time, the Board of Sign Language Interpreters Rules Advisory Committee will hear public and interested parties speak up. Public comment is limited to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to what this committee has statutory authority to regulate. Committees will be limited to 3 minutes and will not be allowed if they are disruptive to the committee's conduct of its business. If you are called on to comment, HLO staff will request the public member to unmute themselves. The chairperson and HLO, reserve the right to end a person's comment early and have HLO staff mute the public member. If the comment does not pertain to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to what this committee has statutory authority to regulate. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment? If so, please raise your hand through Zoom, or raise your hand in the room, or raise your hand in Zoom. Okay. Does anyone want to comment?
There's only one public member, Andrea Park.
Okay.
I don't have a comment for today. Thanks, though.
Okay. That's everything. I can move the adjournment if everyone's okay with that. Control, Board of County Interpreters Rules of Action Committee meeting this year at 2 o'clock exactly.
So good, almost done.
I know, right?
Good job.
Hey.
I